Leo and I have been to Cape Town once before, over 15 years ago, for the wedding of a close friend. During that trip, I fell in love with Cape Town and always yearned to go back. In my eyes, Cape Town is one of, if not the, most beautiful place in the world. I love Cape Town for its perfect combination of natural beauty, rich culture, friendly people, and tireless struggle to move beyond its difficult history. After breakfast, we took an Uber to downtown Cape Town, where we could catch the hop-on, hop-off bus that we nicknamed Ho-Ho. The upper level of the bus is where everybody loves to sit because of the higher vantage point, and it's fun. We quickly discovered that it's extremely windy and cold if you sit in the open air area, so some of us moved to the covered area. The best seat on the Ho-Ho is the first row on the upper level with perfect views from the huge front window while still being sheltered from the elements. There's a pre-recorded tour that can be heard throughout the complimentary earphones that provides historical, geographic, and cultural narration throughout the city and all of the stops. In just over an hour, we rode one entire loop around the city. We discovered some areas and learned a lot of new things that we didn't know about Cape Town. Of particular interest to the kids was an outdoor public pool complex with 4 different swimming pools at Sea Point, and just beyond, a huge playground area at Green Point. We agreed to return there the next day on Ellen's birthday. We alighted at the downtown stop and proceeded to the 2 museums that most interested us, Slave Lodge and South African Museum. The Slave Lodge, built in 1679, is one of the oldest buildings in Cape Town. It was built to house the slaves who belonged to the Dutch East India Company. The Slave Lodge presents a powerful lesson about slavery and injustice. The main hall builds upon the theme of human wrongs to human rights. The rest of the museum exhibited a collection of artifacts to allow visitors to better understand the Cape slave trade, the work and lives of slaves, elements of control, and examples of resistance. A few exhibits from the museum still linger in my mind. There was a placard in one of the rooms that described a Khoi woman who defied authority and protested by committing suicide, thereby freeing herself from a life of servitude. Her body was put on display for a month as a warning to other slaves not to self-harm, because their bodies were considered the property of their owners. Other forms of resistance included working slowly, breaking tools, setting fires, stealing livestock, poisoning food, running away, and ultimately committing suicide. If I were a slave, would I protest? And if so, how? Our children were shocked by a diagram of a slave ship, very similar to one that I remember seeing in my history book from high school. The drawing is of the below-deck hold of a slave ship, showing how slaves were transported across the ocean. Slaves were forced to lie shoulder to shoulder without any room to move, often in shackles and chained together. There would be very limited food and water. Diseases such as scurvy, smallpox, and measles were common. Slave traders expected many slaves to die en route, so they would cram as many slaves as possible, including men, women, and children, in order to maximize their profits. Once arriving in the Cape, slaves would be given new names by their owners. Ironically, sometimes the names would be derogatory and sometimes biblical. Sometimes they would be named after the month of the year that they arrived. There was an exhibit that showed South Africans who bear the surnames of the months of the years. This is part of the legacy of the slave trade. After the Slave Lodge, we stepped outside into a sunny and breezy day and watched a group of youth performers singing and dancing. Their harmonic voices were filled with joy and hope and transported us away from the weight and darkness of the past and into the light of the present. We stopped for lunch at the Eastern Food Bazaar in the downtown area. The Eastern Food Bazaar is a food court offering South Indian, North Indian, Turkish, and even Chinese options. We were on the hunt for a dish called bunny chow, a local favorite that we learned about on the Ho-Ho recorded tour. Bunny chow is hollowed out white bread filled with curry. After lunch, we proceeded to our second museum of the day. The South African Museum is home to a huge collection of everything and anything at the intersection of science, history, and South Africa. We explored a few exhibits, including one that gives a good perspective of where we are in the universe. Given South Africa's expansive coastline, we visited an exhibit on marine life. The highlight of our visit was a maze of rooms that displayed taxidermy of mammals and birds of South Africa. Here we got a close-up view of all of the animals that we saw in Kenya. We all had the impression that the animals looked much bigger in the museum compared to when we saw them on game drives. After our visit to the South African Museum, we returned to purchase some pieces from Nesbert, a local artist we met earlier, who crafts sculptures of African wildlife out of recycled metal from old cars. Once Leo gave the nod, we picked out the pieces that we wanted and probably bought more than we needed. Nesbert was incredibly gracious and told us that we were his biggest customers to date. He couldn't wait to tell his wife about us because it hasn't been easy for his family. We were satisfied with our purchase and Nesbert was overjoyed with his sale. Now it was up to Leo to figure out how to get our metal animals packed and shipped to the other side of the world.